Hello, 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 Diamonds. It's so good to see you. Dr. Sonia here. And I am so happy to be back. I was on vacation for a little while, which is wonderful. I went to Ashland, Oregon for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. If you have not gone, you need to go. You need to. That is one of my happy places, my soul place. It's just a wonderful environment. I enjoyed like the landscape and being up in Ashland, Oregon. And then also the shows, the theater is just incredible. So I am back from my vacation and I am here today talking with Dr. Kimmery Newsom. One more thing I wanted to say is that we have advanced certification in women's sexual intimacy, which we call accuracy. That is open for enrolling at this point in time. We start on September 29th, and you can always go to my website, soniawrightmd.com, and you can go under work with Dr. Sonia, and you will see, just click on that, and you'll see advanced certification in women's sexual intimacy. We can't wait to see you. We start September 29th, but right now, I am talking to Dr. Kimmery Newsom. Dr. Kimmery Newsom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah, I had to ask our relationship expert to come in and talk because I have been getting a lot of questions from women in their 60s. Like, I feel like women in the 60s are now, it's like the time for the new midlife crisis type of thing. I get all sorts of interesting questions about monogamy, polyamory, dating again, what they need to be aware. It's like women in their 60s are coming alive and choosing a life that is for them. I had one woman, and this question has come up again and again and again. So this is why I wanted to bring it to you, and me too. We'll have a discussion about this. But basically, she was saying that she's been in a long-term relationship. She's been in this marriage for like 20 plus years, and at this point it's sexless, and she doesn't necessarily want to put the effort in to make it anything other than sexless. They don't have much in common, and it's mainly about financial security. And she's at this point where she's deciding, should I stay or should I go? And of course, this is a question that a decision that she has to make. It's not a decision that I would make for her or that you would make for her. But I know there's a number of women that are actually at the same point in their life when they're thinking, what is it I want in my life? Is this how I want my, and it used to be at one time, maybe hundreds of years ago, 60 was kind of it, like life was just about over. But now life, you still have another 30 of your life at least ahead of you, right, when you're in your 60s. And so it's a question becomes, is this what you want to do for the next 30 days, right? Excuse me, 30 days, 30 years potentially, right? So what type of things need to go into this consideration if you're making this decision? What are some things that they should be aware of if they're in that place of, should I stay or should I go? And honestly, this pertains to women of all different ages,
Mhm.
but specifically, I am seeing this question again and again and again in the women in the 60s range. So I just wanted to bring it to you and to talk to you about what you see, since you've been doing relationship coaching and marriage therapy counseling for like many, many years. So that's why I'm dropping this nice thing at your feet.
Well, thank you for the gift. I appreciate
You're so welcome.
that. There are several things to take into consideration, but it's very interesting to me that these questions are happening now. What about in your, 50s, right? Like when it first maybe became sexless, because I would assume that it has been sexless for a while, as opposed to, a few weeks, because that's not considered sexless, right? So I mean, we're talking a number of years, and so it's kind of like, what has brought you to this place of asking that question? That would be my first, inquiry, to try and figure out, where they're headed, where they're coming from, what would be some good things for them to consider. But I also want to talk about this idea of being stuck. People feel stuck all the time. They feel like, I can't, there's nowhere for me to go. I don't have any resources. I don't have any people around me. And in some cases, that is absolutely the truth. People can be isolated if they're in relationships where there's been abuse. They can become, very hopeless in a sense. But it doesn't sound like the women that you are referring to are in positions of being hopeless, with abuse or anything like that.
Right. There
You
might
know,
be another type of hopeless. You like
right?
specifically about like why now, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to 10 years earlier, something like that. And maybe there is still hope that they could revive the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Years.
Yeah.
And maybe at this point, all that hope is gone and the reality of their life is hitting them, and they're trying to decide. And they're also wrestling with concepts of self. Am I too old to make a change? I bet is a lot. This is a question that I get with a number of people too. But their perspective is shifting. And now they're questioning. And before they might have thought, I'm too old, I just have to live with this. But now they're seeing that women are choosing at all different ages to choose themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so what basically previously might have been a foregone conclusion that, oh, I'll just stay in this relationship till I die. Now they're like, I'm seeing more and more women making a choice for them that works for them at any age. And so it's like there's a hopelessness in some ways and a hopefulness in other ways.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that, as I was listening to you talk, one thing that I think is imperative is, helping people to understand that it's okay to be independent. They are, women who come from a generation of, you find your partner, you find your mate, and you just deal with whatever comes with that, right? And now they're having a realization that they don't have to put up with things that don't make them comfortable, or they don't feel like they're getting their needs met in the relationship. And so there is no such thing as too old. As long as you have breath in your body, there are things you can do differently. And so being able to help women who are in positions that, are saying, as you said, of all ages, but in particular, we're speaking to the women who have reached out to you who are in their 60s and asking these questions, is that there's always something you can do. And financially, as much as the economy is crazy right now, the hope is that you wouldn't have to feel tied to someone or stay in a situation that is not beneficial for you for the financial situation that you may find yourself in. You got a question: are there friends around who could, help you? Do you have, enough of a credit score to get a loan, if you need to kind of get you started and get you moving forward? Do you have children who you're close to and who may be willing to help you until you're able to be where you want to be financially? And all these different types of questions, because we have options that we may not have had years ago. And so being willing to explore those options is something that's really important too.
Well, I think while you're talking, I'm also realizing that women in the 60s are in a generation where they grew up having to work, right? And maybe the generation before did not necessarily. And so maybe financially, this looks a little different than it has in the past, mm-hmm. right? The majority of women have been out in the workforce. They do have their own funds, and maybe they're more comfortable if they stayed in the relationship. But maybe it's not like a full destitution like it might have been previously. Or maybe like in the area of independence, they've been relatively independent. And so it's easier to make that choice to go or, to stay based, but not necessarily having to do it because there's a level of dependence on another person where you don't even get the opportunity or the option to have a choice, whether you're going to stay or go. But I also like the fact that there's like, you have other people that you can depend on, and hopefully you haven't been isolated in a number of different ways. So I think that that's also important. Now, what kind of questions should they be asking themselves overall in terms of like their thought work, what their mindset is in terms of doing this? Like we talked a little bit about, no, you're not too old. You have the bandwidth, you have the autonomy, you can make the choice for you. It doesn't really matter about your age. You do get to decide that you want this in their life. What other things, if somebody were in a coaching session or therapy session with you, what other things would you be helping them ponder or process or figure out?
Yeah, the first question is, do you ever want to have sex again? Is that something that's important to you?
Mhm.
Because if it's important to you, then you start to make decisions based on that fact. Yes, it's important to me. I want to have sex again. So number one is, and then we go down the list and we talk about what those things are. Because if you're saying your marriage is sexless or your relationship is sexless and you don't want that, then okay, what are you willing to do? Because I mean, don't get me wrong, there are sometimes when people they don't want to have sex with the person that they with, and they fine with that, right? But these are people who are saying they're not fine with that and they want more. And so how important is it to you
Yeah, and
to get
then
the
there
football,
it's like different options. Before it was like stay or go. Like if you're in a sexless relationship, you either decide you're going to stay in that relationship or go. But now there's consensual non-monogamy, right? And so people have different ways of looking at it. And probably before there was, non-monogamy as well,
just
It's,
regular.
now it's
Yeah.
more open and more discussion, right? So that becomes a part of it too. And I think that that's an important point, right? First of
Mhm.
all, they may not want sex, and so that is fine. We're not trying to make a problem where there's no problem, right? But then they
Mhm.
decide, do they want sexual intimacy? Do they want it with just themselves? Do they want it with another person? Those are the type of questions, the next type of questions. And then also, very often, kind of a fallout of a sexless marriage is, especially for women, is we spend a number of time, and I say we because I was in a sexless relationship for a long time, and we spend a lot of time blaming ourselves,
Mhm.
whether it might not have anything to do with us specifically. Very often we don't exactly know how the sex left the marriage, right? And so we come up with all these thoughts and ideas. And some things might be, I'm not attractive enough, it's my fault. Somehow, especially for women, we have a tendency to make things our fault, as opposed to just asking the question and maybe finding out that, their libido is low, or they have erectile dysfunction problems, or whatever it is, but we kind of take it on. And so even if we leave that relationship, we have work to do on ourselves, right? So it's almost like spend some time looking at what the fallout or the ramifications is of this sexless relationship on us before we move on, or maybe while we're moving on, when we decide that we're looking for another relationship or such. Because I think that there's something that we need to see. Has this affected us? Has it not affected us? What are our thoughts specifically about us as a sexual being? So I think that that's something important. And I've been working with a number of clients that are currently currently I'm working with, or in the past, that have sexless relationships. And they amaze me, whatever choice that they make. Some people go all in the relationship and they work on bringing back the sex. Some people are satisfied without having the sex in the relationship, but they want that connection, that intimate connection. And some people are ready to go, and other people are ready to stay and just, be more like roommates. So there's so many different ways to do all of this. So we want to be clear that there's not one way and one decision
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
has to be made in terms of if you're in a sexless relationship. So it's not specifically that, but I think that that's an important aspect as well. What's the fallout? What effect has this had on the individual?
Yeah, for sure. And, in the process of figuring out, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? Do you want to maintain? Do you want to ask questions about opening up your relationship and what that would look like as well? But you're right. You have to do that mind work. You have to do that internal work where you make a determination about how you can be moving forward and what's going to be most healthy for you as you move forward into maybe another relationship, or if you're looking for just having fun with people, what's going to be most important for you, and for your psyche and for your self concept, the way that you view who you are based on the next steps that you make, because we have to do that work. And as women, we're conditioned anyway in society to blame ourselves for everything is everybody's fault, right? Every woman's fault, excuse me.
I was going to say, well,
Every woman's fault, every woman's fault, and that goes all the way back through, if we're looking at, modern psychology, and pre-modern psychology. It's the mom's fault. Everything is the mom's fault, literally. And you can read it. And
So
so
convenient to just blame people and blame one sex, one gender, right?
one gender. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you just get to do whatever you want. It's her
Exactly.
fault.
Yeah, yeah, it's mom's fault, everything, and so being able to come out of that conditioning too, because they are also, if we're talking about the women in their 60s, they are also still of that generation where everything was the mom's or the woman's fault. And so being able to have a mindset and an understanding that it takes two people in a situation, and looking at what you would like to do differently if you decide to leave the marriage, what you would like to do differently if you
That's a
decide
good
to
point.
stay in the
Yeah.
relationship, because being able to have an understanding that sometimes things become the way they become because both or one person gives up and they decide to stop trying, right? Your efforts, fall on deaf ears. And so it makes it very difficult for you to keep wanting to try, right? And so what do you want to do differently in the next relationship if you decide to leave? Right?
But just
How are you
in
going to maybe you make it clear, this is the desire that I have for intimacy. What are your ideas about what sexual intimacy is supposed to look like, or you like to have it in the relationship? let's
right.
let's match that up and do whatever it is that we need to do to maintain that.
Yeah, I think that that's something. If you're like a person that needs touch and sexual intimacy is part of that touch for your love language, then I think that that's important if you choose to go into another relationship to make that clear that this is something that's very important for you. So,
Mhm.
so from the beginning that you're kind of matched up with the person that you like. And I do like your question, what would you like to do differently in another relationship, but just overall in your life? What would you like different about your life? Like you're only in your 60s, you probably have 30 more years. What would you like to do different? How would you like your life to be in a different way? And I love this third of the life to be about like your legacy. What do you want your legacy to be for you and for other people, right? And so like all those kind of questions, I think that that's what we're really seeing reflected in our 60s. It's like, okay, this, not that this is the last shot, but this is where like I'm healthy, I'm active, like I've got all this going for me. If I'm going to make a change, this is the best time to make this change. Maybe not in the 70s or 80s, but the 60s, you're like, okay, and I can still bounce back from what other financial hit there might be in this regard. So I think that's why we're seeing a lot of people looking at their 60s, right? And it's the new midlife crisis type of time, right? Where we're like, okay, what is it that we want our life to be from this point onward? But I love how you say, what would you like to do differently? I do think we need to be intentional about this.
Yes.
And not just kind of float from one situation we don't want to be in to another situation.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the point you were talking about legacy, and it brought up, some of my things in my training. And there are always these theories of development where people who are in their 60s and forward are in a developmental stage. It's called generativity versus stagnation. And if they have lived the life that they want, if they continue to live the life that they want, then they get to a point where as they move into the next 30 years or so, they continue to do those things, and they can leave this life feeling like they've done the things that they need to do in order for them to live the fullest life that they want, and for the people around them to see how to live life to the full, right? Then there's people who are in situations right now that we're talking about that are stagnant. Their relationships aren't moving. They aren't able to do the things that they want to do. They feel stuck. They feel like they don't have any real way of getting to a point where they can leave a legacy that they can be proud of. And so that's where those questions start to come in. But people can change stagnation to generativity, to, being able to, have a mindset of generosity towards themselves. Not
Oh,
just talking about, being generous to other people, but a mindset of generosity towards yourself, which includes compassion, which includes care, which includes giving yourself grace, which includes giving yourself space to make decisions that are best for you. Because
capacity.
60,
Uh-huh.
often at 60, they've probably made decisions for, if they had children, for their children, made decisions solely based on what their partner wanted, And now it's time for them to decide what it is that they want for themselves. And they're looking around and they're saying, nobody has really made decisions based on my needs. So now it's time for me to make decisions about myself and what my needs are.
So diamonds, did you hear that? Generosity to self. Like you get to, we right here, Dr. Kimmery and Dr. Sonia are giving you permission for this generosity to self, where you get to have the self-love, the self-compassion. You get to be kind to yourself. You get to prioritize yourself first. And you get to decide what works best for you without necessarily taking 1,000 people into consideration, right? By your 60s, your kids are more or less grown, right? They should hopefully be out of the house for the second or third time.
Right.
So it really is a time, where you get to make the decision finally for you. And it gets to be a wonderful time. So I love that generosity to self. That's a beautiful thing. All righty, we're going to wrap this up. So Dr. Kimmery, any last words? I know you've got words. Any last words that you would like to share?
What? You got to say it like that, though, and you're right, I do have words. So, but yeah, if we're looking at, final thoughts on this, remember that it's okay to take an examination of what has happened. Take an inventory over time and look at what it is that you have decided that you want for your life based off of everything that has happened and that has come before. What do you want your next 30 years to look like, as Dr. Sonia said? And decide from there what those steps are. And it's not necessarily always meaning you're going to leave the relationship. It could be a conversation about how to open it up so that both of you can have the satisfaction that you need and still have your, companionate relationship, because the person may have become a companion as opposed to a lover. And so being able to take inventory and make a decision based on that inventory is kind of the best route that I can see forward for you. But don't give up, and don't let yourself, don't beat yourself up, don't give up, and, don't let yourself just sit in a situation that causes you pain and misery.
Yeah, I think that we started this conversation from a place of hopelessness and being stuck. And hopefully the diamonds can see, anybody listening to this call or seeing us on YouTube, that we're now in this place where there's endless possibility. And if you just make that shift, your whole entire situation can be exactly the same. But if you open up your mind from a place of stuck and hopelessness to a place of, wait, I have as many choices as I can think of. Right. And actually spend the time to look and decide. And we talked about, ask yourself, how important is sex for you? That's an important question. Ask yourself what you want your future to look like. Ask yourself, what would you like to do different? And then have the compassion and be kind to yourself. So there's so many different areas that we touched on today. Dr. Kimmery is a relationship coach within my organization, and you can find her in the Lit Click Club. She does classes either on relationship or trauma, depending on the month. So come join us in the Lit Click Club. And we also always will include your information, because you are your own personal coach as well and therapist. And so we also have your information in the show notes if people want to click on that and find out more about you. Dr. Kimmery, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm trying to think of a really big word. Alliteration or something, but it's not illuminating. That's the word that I want. Illuminate. It really wasn't that big, but shedding some light on this topic, let's just say. So thank you so much.
You are welcome.
So good to see you. Take care.
All right.